It's day 7 of launching a new venture capital fund from scratch. Today, I'm in London, figuring out one of the hardest parts, how to raise the money. Because without capital, there's no fund. Raising a first-time VC fund is a little bit like starting a startup, but instead of customers, you need LPs, limited partners. Instead of product market fit, you need fund market fit. And instead of traction, you need trust. In this episode, I'll take you behind the scenes of a critical step in our journey, our first fundraising strategy sprint in London, and I'll share 5 key lessons we've learned as we are building this from scratch. So we soft launched the fund last week, and that was nothing fancy. No press releases, nothing big, just talking to people and getting a sense for what the appetite is out there. We actually came out with this news at the Intimate Pitch Date by Icecubator Lab in Zug. We wanted to test the waters because Icecubator Lab has been incubating startups for years. But now, for the first time, we're putting all the pieces together and we're building the fund to make use of the many opportunities we get. Early stage technology startups with a focus on deep tech, medtech, and life sciences. This trip to London is about answering one big question for the fund. How do we get from zero to the first close? Before we dive into the 5 lessons of our fundraising strategy, it's important to point out that we are currently not actively marketing this fund just yet. We are discussing our existing portfolio companies and brainstorming how we would go about raising a fund. So let's get into it. Right now I'm in the lobby before my first meeting, excited to meet the first fundraiser for the fund. I think it's going to be very important to get an army together of people who support us, and it's the first step to signing one of them. Lesson 1, right from the streets of London. Fundraising isn't selling, it's discovery. You don't just pitch investors, you figure out what kind of fund the market actually wants to back. This is all about listening, especially in these first stages where testing the waters, looking at all the other funds out there and trying to find our gap. We need to find out conceptually, who are our LPs? What do they care about? Where's their allocation pressure? And that's critical market intel. So lesson 2, institutional investors don't just look at returns. They assess risk frameworks, governance, your team structure, your compliance setup. One mistake many first-time GPs make is thinking passion alone or track record alone is enough. It's not. You need to speak the LP's language, and that means legal structure, data rooms, and regulatory passporting. Being very clear on the fund strategy is also key. LPs who invest in VC funds are very professional, and they will do their allocation according to their risk and return appetite. You do not have to think for them. This brings us back to the fund market fit. Explore and test the product first. So as I come out of this last meeting, I was just thinking maybe I spend a little bit of time to explain what an LP actually is, or what an investor in a fund, what do they want. So the fund will be eventually structured in an LP-GP format. So there will be GP, general partner, and that's the fund manager, or managers, multiple even. And they are in charge of the day-to-day operations, making the investments and running the fund. Whereas the LPs, the limited partners, they're the investors. They're the investors backing the investment firm. So that's, I think it's important to understand. Often these terms get thrown around, LP, GP, and I'm certainly guilty of that myself, so in future you'll know what I'm referring to. So the role that the LPs play in a fund is that they provide the capital that will be invested, and the GP then takes that money and runs around the world looking for interesting companies to invest in. And once the GP finds an interesting company, they make an investment on behalf of the LPs who are invested in the fund. And as compensation for all the hard work that the GP is doing,
running around the world, figuring out what investments to make, taking on the risk of putting their career on the line, basically to put their face on this whole fund operation. The investors pay the GP a management fee that is usually around 2%. And on top of that, if the investments are successful, then the GP gets a profit share. So a share of the profits from the investments. So once the investments are exited, once there is a return of the investments, first of all the money is returned to the investors. So they first of all make all their money back, and then any additional profit that the investments have made is then split. And the split is usually 80% to the LPs, to the investors, and 20% to the GPs, the fund managers. That's an incentive to the GPs to find very good investments and return money for the LPs. And the LPs basically incentivize the GPs to make the money, because if the incentives are aligned, the GPs are more likely to really put all their efforts into finding the good investments. As the great Charlie Munger says, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. Another thing that stood out this week, the pitch deck isn't just a sales tool, it's your thesis crystallized. It forces alignment in your own head. Who are you backing? Why you? Why now? And why this team? Before talking to a single LP, you need a killer deck that answers these questions intuitively. A set of documents that shows any LP looking at your stuff that there are only green flags. This means identifying any weak points beforehand and preemptively turning any potential orange flags into green flags. Lesson 4, your pipeline is your moat. Most first-time funds worry about raising capital, but what often convinces LPs is your access, your pipeline. At IceCube Ventures, that's our advantage. We're plugged into top European universities where the next generation of founders are being built. It's not theoretical. We've been working with them for years. You may have mixed feelings about investing in Europe right now, but from my perspective, it's still a place where highly educated people will come up through these great institutions and they'll have great ideas. Will they scale there in Europe? Who knows? But they don't necessarily need to. We'll take them to market wherever it's best for them. Maybe the most surprising lesson, you can't even market your fund until the legal structure is in place. In the UK, Switzerland, across Europe, you need regulatory approvals before pre-marketing even. That means your entire timeline hinges not only on investor interest, but on legal readiness. We're building that foundation now. A European company that needs to allocate time, money, and effort to dealing with regulation before even getting started, before having the first discussion with anyone who might help? Unheard of. But seriously, this is another example of how we're holding ourselves back. Another reason why I'm happy I moved to the UAE, where you are welcomed with open arms as an entrepreneur. All this regulation does is that it prevents innovation, small new funds emerging and allowing innovation to happen. Instead, the advantage lies with the existing large firms who have the teams of lawyers dealing with this. All right, wrapping up here. This has been a crazy couple days in London, looking for the right strategy to start the fundraising, talking to people who could be key players in the months leading up to the official launch. And it's been a wild ride to be out here on the streets, like raising this fund from scratch. If you want to be part of that journey, consider subscribing to this channel. Also, if you're interested in what we actually do at IceCube Ventures, I've made a video on the investment strategy where I go into a lot more detail on the different types of companies that we're looking at and different stages of companies that we are potentially going to investigate. Watch this video next to find out more about that, and I'll see you in the next one.